So Ted Cruz was confronted and lashed out at a restaurant the other night. This is, of course, in response to the Uvalde, Texas mass shooting at a school. This went kind of viral. It's interesting. Look at how aggressive this guy is who's talking to Ted Cruz. Let's watch it.
Tell me, why does this keep happening? And why did you come here to the convention to take blood money? Why? When 19 children died, 19 children died. That's on your hands. That's on your hands. That proves that's on your hands.
One more time.
And why did you come here to the convention to take blood money? Why? When 19 children died, 19 children died. That's on your hands. That's on your hands. That proves that's on your hands.
He sort of waves at the end and giggles. Now, I read contradicting reports in terms of who dragged this guy out. Some articles said it was Ted's security, and then other articles said like some random restaurant goer was holding this guy back. This is an interesting clip for a number of reasons. If you look at it, at face value, you could say, well, that guy seems like really unhinged and loud and aggressive, and that's not a good look. Maybe he's mentally ill in one respect or another. But then on the other hand, you look at it and you say, wait, isn't that actually the most sane thing you could do, given the fact that we keep having these mass shootings and children keep dying, that like directly confronting the politicians who refuse to change the laws, which would reduce the number of school shootings, isn't that like the most sane thing you could do? So it's weird because, part of my brain when I look at this, I go, well, how's your run-of-the-mill independent voter, relatively apolitical person gonna view this? But then on the other hand, again, they might not view it favorably. But if you look at the polls, all the gun control reforms that we talk about on a regular basis, whether it's universal background checks or high-capacity magazine bans or even assault weapons ban now or new testing and permitting for people to be allowed to use guns, like all that stuff polls through the roof. And it looks like this dude and many other people just kind of hit their tipping point when it comes to the issue of mass shootings. And so I can't help but give in to the side of my brain that says, I want more politicians to feel like this in public. I really do. Because Ted Cruz, I don't have the number in front of me, but I would guess that, and put it in the comment section if you do know it off the top of your head, I would guess that he's taken millions from the NRA. And so his position on guns is informed by that legal bribe where he doesn't even support very basic reforms that would minimally reduce the number of mass shootings. So, given those facts, yeah, if Ted Cruz has to think twice the next time a vote comes up on one of these things, well, that's a win. That's a positive thing. Now, will it actually have the effect of forcing him to change his vote? I doubt it, because money talks, and he's gotten a lot of money from the NRA, but I mean, I honestly, I'd like to see more of this. I would if we lived in a country where politicians were uncomfortable in public all the time, and they felt like the population absolutely despised them with a burning passion, maybe it would lead to at least some minimal change around the edges. There was a great saying, I think it was in an old Michael Moore movie, that in the U.S., the people are scared of the government. In France, the government is scared of the people. And so you always have all these, these protests and these strikes over there, and the people really can sort of force the government into submission, into doing some of the things that they want. And here you generally see the opposite. Well, now, it looks like, at least in this instance, maybe the roles are reversing a little bit. I mean, wouldn't you like it if every time George W. Bush or Dick Cheney went in public, they were confronted with angry Americans telling them that they had blood on their hands, they had the blood of hundreds of thousands, if not a million, innocent Iraqi civilians. They had the blood on their hands of the torture that they greenlit. Again, I think that even though I acknowledge that to maybe you're relatively apolitical person or you're independent voter or whatever, they might look at this and think, well, that guy looks unhinged. Maybe he's mentally off. At the same time, I mean, I support every avenue of potential change short of just offensive violence. I support. And so when I look at this, I think I can't help but sympathize with that guy. Now, the other thing is people might object and say, look, Ted Cruz obviously didn't want those kids to die. And everybody knows that in his heart of hearts, of course he would prefer that they didn't die. There's no argument about that for me. But the fact of the matter is, when you have his ideal system when it comes to gun control and the laws we should have or the lack of laws we should have, the end result is 39,000 dead Americans every single year. Now that includes homicides, suicides, accidents, school shootings, every sort of gun death you can imagine. That 39,000 number encapsulates all of them, but we are off the charts compared to other countries. I mean, we're way above and beyond the number of gun deaths in every other country. So, but Ted Cruz looks at that and says, I don't care. I don't care. He has a position on the Second Amendment, which is a misinterpretation of the Second Amendment, which is, an individual right to own virtually any firearm. And that is the logical end result of that policy choice and that policy prescription. And so to confront him with that fact that, hey man, the thing you want leads to this. It leads to this. I think that's a positive thing. I think that's a good thing. So make more politicians afraid is what I say. Make them uncomfortable. And he's been particularly inartful and clunky in how he's approached this situation in the wake of the horrendous school shooting. Like, the more sophisticated right-wing politicians, they know, like, let me just keep my mouth shut, because I'm not going to win this argument right now. It's not possible. But Ted Cruz isn't that sophisticated. He loves the sound of his own voice. He's a sophist, and he tries to talk himself out of a corner. So the recent thing that he did, of course, as I'm sure all of you guys saw, is he went on Fox News and did a bunch of interviews, and he basically said, like, it's egregious that we don't have one door in every school. We need a single point of entry in every school, and you need guards at that door. So he would much rather ban doors than limit the number of guns, or limit certain kinds of guns, or expand background checks. Which shows how ridiculous he is. And by the way, go talk to the fire department about having one door, one point of entry. And let them tell you, the potential downsides of that. And by the way, this place, he said it in his NRA speech. He went and gave an NRA speech, and he said, the answer to a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Well, Ted, what do you say about a situation where there were over 100 good guys with guns sitting outside of the school shooting, and they didn't do anything to stop it? What about that? He doesn't really have a response to that. All he has is cliches and platitudes and classic tropes that he goes back to, and the data completely flies in the face of his position on this. And look, let me make this point, because I think it's the debate-ending point in this conversation. I would respect it much more if people who were in favor of no restrictions at all on guns, no reform on guns at all, if they just said, look, I know that this system leads to a lot of dead bodies. I know that we're off the charts when it comes to gun violence, and it's because we have the most guns in this country. But I value that freedom over the safety you would gain and the security you would gain of the reforms. If people just came out and admitted that, I'd say, hey man, look, fair enough. It is a debatable thing. Where do you draw the line between security and safety versus freedom? It's somewhere on that spectrum, and everybody draws their line in a different place. I would respect that argument. But the thing is, they don't make that argument. They lie, and they try to have their cake and eat it too, and say, no, not only am I in favor of no gun reform at all, but also the system that we have right now makes us the safest. Well, if that were true, the U.S. would already be the safest country in the world, or at least in the developed world, and we're not. We have the most gun deaths. So clearly, there's a link. More guns equals more gun deaths. The old conservative trope of, look, there are more bad guys than good guys, so if you arm everybody, the good guys keep the bad guys in check. That turns out to not be true. You need to empirically test it, and when you do that, you find out more guns equal more gun deaths. So, I have no idea this guy's backstory, the one who's yelling at Ted Cruz. I mean, you know, knowing right-wing media, maybe they'll dig some stuff up and find out he's a piece of shit and he was a domestic abuser or whatever. I don't know. I don't know anything about this guy's background, so I'm not going to defend him personally. What I will say is the general notion of the public yelling at politicians in public, making them uncomfortable, making them think twice, and letting them know, like, hey, assholes, we got our eye on you. I support that. I mean, there's a reason why we talk about this all the time, but Congress has an approval rating that ranges from like 9% to 21% on a good day. So a little bit of accountability, you know, shaking them up a little bit, letting them know, like, hey, I know you're in your ivory tower and you're disconnected, but we're here, motherfucker. And we see what you're doing and we don't like it. I think that's a good thing. Now, if this had in any way, shape, or form came to violence and this guy started swinging at Ted Cruz, then you lose me. Then I'd say, no, I don't support that in any way, shape, or form. Offensive violence is, I think, wrong by definition. But this isn't that. This is like words. And I'm a huge advocate of free speech, including holding politicians accountable, even if it's in public and even if it's in an awkward situation. So I guess more of this, man. More of this. I don't think Ted Cruz wanted those kids to die, but the policies that he supports certainly does lead to more dead children, and I think that's inarguable. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.